Captain Deho pressed his face against the cold metal window of his spaceship. The stars looked different now. Ever since the attack started 3 years ago, the galaxy felt darker, more dangerous. He watched the broken pieces of metal floating in space where the Centauri mining station used to be. 2 days ago, this place was home to 50,000 workers from 12 different alien species. Now there was nothing but twisted metal and silence. The attackers had come without warning, destroyed everything and disappeared like ghosts in the night. Deho had seen this same scene 47 times before. Always the same pattern. The enemy ships would appear from nowhere, hit fast and hard, then vanish before anyone could fight back. They never left messages. They never asked for anything. They never even tried to talk. Lieutenant Minho walked up to him holding a data pad. His young face looked tired and scared. "Captain, we got the sensor readings from the attack. The enemy used the same weapons. As always, energy beams that cut through our strongest shields like Paper Deho took the data pad and looked at the numbers. The attack had lasted exactly 17 minutes. From start to finish, 17 minutes to wipe out an entire space station. That took 20 years to build. The enemy was getting faster, on Earth. The news channels showed the same terrible pictures every day, burning cities on distant worlds, refugee ships packed with scared families, empty space where whole planets used. To be the mysterious attackers were moving across the galaxy like a fire that never stopped burning. Commander Nari sat in the war room on Mars looking at holographic maps of the galaxy. Red dots marked every place the enemy had attacked. In 3 years, those red dots had spread across 2 spiral arms and were moving toward the center where Earth and the other major worlds were located. The other species had tried everything. The proud Velkari sent their best diplomats to try talking to the attackers. The messages came back unopened. The ancient Morvans, who had lived for thousands of years, sent mathematical equations and star charts showing they wanted peace. The attackers ignored them completely. The telepathic Nexari tried something different. They projected thoughts of friendship and cooperation directly into space, hoping the enemy could read minds like they could. The psychic messages disappeared into the void with no response. The Nexari said it felt like shouting into an empty room back on his ship. Deho walked through the corridors past his crew members. Everyone moved quietly these days. The jokes and laughter that used to fill the ship had died away, replaced by whispers and worried looks. His communications officer, Suyan, tried to contact other ships in the area, but got only static. The enemy never left any clues about who they were or what they wanted. They took nothing from the places they attacked. No resources, no prisoners, no technology. They just destroyed everything and left. Behind them was always the same thing, complete silence. Dr. Hye-jin worked day and night in her laboratory on Europa, studying the few pieces of enemy technology they had found. The metal was unlike anything in the galaxy, it seemed, to absorb sound and light, making it hard to study under normal conditions. When she tried to cut it with lasers, the beam just disappeared. She discovered something strange about how the enemies fought. They always targeted communication equipment. First, satellite dishes, radio towers, quantum transmitters. Anything that could send or receive messages got destroyed in the first few seconds of every attack. It was like they were afraid of communication itself. Admiral Tae-jin commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled, 200 ships from Earth and her colonies, all working together to protect the refugee ships pouring into human space. Every day brought more aliens fleeing the terror beings who had never trusted humans before now, begged for protection. The refugees told the same stories everywhere. The attackers came without warning, struck with terrible force, and left nothing behind. A Velkari trader named Zol Kar described watching his home world burn from orbit. The enemy, ships, had destroyed every city in less than an hour, then flew away without taking anything. A group of Morvan scholars spoke about their ancient libraries being turned to ash. The Morvans had kept records for 10,000 years, books and data crystals that contained the history of entire civilizations, all gone in minutes. The scholars wept as they spoke, something Morvans almost never did. Engineer Boram studied the attack patterns, trying to find some logic, some reason behind the destruction. She worked with computers that could process millions of calculations per second, but the enemy movements seemed random. At first, the more she looked, the more she began to see something else. The attacks were not random. They followed a pattern, but it was so complex that it took her months to figure it out. The enemy was targeting specific types of worlds, not the richest or most populated, but the ones with the most advanced communication networks. Worlds that had just developed faster than. Light messaging got hit first. Space stations with powerful transmitters were destroyed before military bases. The enemy seemed to have a list of targets based on how well they could talk to other worlds on his ship. Captain Day Ho received a message from Earth Command. All available ships were to return home immediately. The enemy fleet had been spotted at the edge of human space, moving slowly but steadily toward Earth. The final battle was coming, and everyone knew it, as Day Ho ordered his crew. To prepare for the jump to Earth, he looked one more time at the wreckage of the mining station. Somewhere out there, the enemy ships were planning their next attack. Earth, with its billions of people and hundreds of communication satellites, would be their biggest target yet. The mysterious attackers had terrorized the galaxy for 3 years, destroying everything in their path. But they had made one mistake. They had saved Earth for last, and Earth was where humanity had spent those 3 years, preparing for war in ways the enemy could never imagine. The jump drive powered up and space twisted around the ship as they flew toward Earth at faster than light speed. Day Ho wondered if they would arrive in time to make a difference. The enemy had never been stopped before, never even slowed down. But then again, they had never faced humanity when humanity was truly angry. The stars streaked past the windows like tears of light, and in the distance, Earth waited blue and green and beautiful. Everything worth fighting for was there, everything worth dying for. The silent terror that had swept across the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened humanity's home. The war that would decide the fate of every living being in the galaxy was about to begin. And for the first time in 3 years, the mysterious attackers might finally break their silence. But by then, it might be too late for them to say anything that mattered. Lieutenant Minho sat alone in the communications room at 3 in the morning. The rest of the crew was sleeping, but he could not stop listening to the static between radio frequencies. Something was hidden in that noise, something important. Had been hearing it for weeks, but could not figure out what it was. The sound was very faint, like a whisper in a crowded room. It came and went in patterns that seemed almost like language, but not from any species he knew. Minho recorded hours of the strange signals and played them back at different speeds. He tried filtering out the background noise, but the pattern remained mysterious. 2 decks below Suyan worked in the language laboratory. She was the best translator in the human fleet, able to speak 43 different alien languages. When Minho brought her the recordings, she listened with growing excitement. This was not random noise. This was someone trying to communicate, working together. They spent 5 days analyzing the signals. The pattern repeated every 4 hours and 27 minutes exactly. Each repetition was slightly different, as if the sender was changing the message, hoping someone would finally understand. The signals came from deep space in the direction where the enemy attacks were happening. Dr. Hyejin arrived from her research station on Europa carrying data crystals filled with information about enemy technology. When she heard the recordings, her face went pale. She recognized something in the signal structure. It matched quantum frequencies that most civilizations had never even discovered. The three scientists worked without sleep for 2 more days. Slowly, they began to decode what they had found. The signals were not coming from the attackers themselves, but from somewhere behind enemy lines. Someone was sending distress calls using technology more advanced than anything in the known galaxy. The first complete message they translated made them all stop breathing. "Help us, they are coming for everyone next. You must learn the truth before it is too late." We tried to warn the others, but they could not hear our quantum transmissions. The Dominion fears what we discovered. Suyan translated more messages as they came in. The senders called themselves the last speakers. They were the final survivors of a civilization that had been destroyed by the Dominion 50 years ago. Hidden on a dead world, they had been broadcasting warnings ever since. The last speakers told a story that changed everything. The Dominion was not just destroying worlds at random, they were hunting for something specific: advanced communication technology that could link different minds together across space. They had done this before many times across thousands of years. Long ago, there had been a great civilization called the Unity. They had developed quantum communication networks that allowed instant contact across the entire galaxy. Different species could share thoughts and knowledge as easily as talking to someone in the same room. The Unity had brought peace to millions of worlds, but the Dominion had come for them too. They had fought a terrible war that lasted centuries. In the end, the Unity was destroyed and every piece of their quantum technology was wiped out. The Dominion made sure that no other civilization would ever develop such dangerous communication systems. Engineer Boram studied the technical data hidden in the quantum transmissions the last speakers had. Managed to save some Unity technology before their world was destroyed. They had been trying to rebuild the quantum networks in secret, but the Dominion had found them. The quantum communication systems worked by connecting minds directly without the need for radio waves or computer networks. Two people using quantum transmitters could share thoughts, feelings, and memories instantly, even if they were on opposite sides of the galaxy. Multiple minds could link together, creating a network of shared consciousness. Dr. Hyojin realized why the Dominion feared this technology so much. A quantum network would allow every species in the galaxy to understand each other perfectly. Wars would become impossible when enemies could feel each other's. Hope would spread faster than fear. Unity would be stronger than conquest. The last speakers had hidden technical blueprints in their transmissions. Detailed plans for building quantum transmitters that could link human minds with alien consciousness. The technology was incredibly complex, but Earth had the resources and knowledge to build it. Admiral Tae-jin called an emergency meeting when he learned about the discovery. The Dominion fleet was only days away from Earth. If the quantum network could be built in time, it might give them a weapon more powerful than any missile or energy beam. The power of perfect communication, Commander Nari coordinated with alien refugees who had skills needed for the project, Velkari engineers who understood exotic metals, Morvan scientists who could work with quantum mathematics, Nexari technicians who already knew how minds could connect. The project would require every species working together. The work began immediately in secret facilities across the solar system. On Luna, they built the main transmitter array. On Mars, they manufactured the quantum crystals. On Europa, they programmed the control systems. Earth provided the power sources and the final assembly location. Minho worked with teams of linguists to create translation protocols that would allow different species to understand each other through the network. The system had to preserve individual identity while enabling shared communication. It was the most complex programming challenge in galactic history. Su Yan coordinated with the last speakers who provided guidance through their quantum transmissions. The ancient survivors were dying on their dead world, but they were determined to help Earth succeed where they had failed. Their messages became weaker each day As their equipment failed, Dr. Hyejin discovered something terrifying in the final transmissions. The Dominion was not just afraid of quantum networks. They had been infected by something else. Something. From outside the galaxy that fed on connected minds, the networks that should have brought peace had become traps. The last speakers explained the terrible truth. The Dominion had once been explorers and teachers who believed in communication and understanding. They had built their own quantum network thousands of years ago, but something had used those connections to control their minds, turning them into destroyers. Whatever had infected the Dominion still existed somewhere in the dark spaces, between stars. It was waiting for another quantum network to be built so it could spread its influence again. The last speakers had learned how to shield their transmissions, but they did not know if the shields would work on a galaxy-wide network engineer. Boram worked frantically to understand the shielding technology. The quantum transmissions showed how to build barriers that could protect connected minds from outside influence. But the shields had never been tested on the scale Earth was planning as. The Dominion fleet approached the outer solar system. The quantum network neared completion. Earth had one chance to unite the galaxy through communication or doom every thinking being to the same fate that had claimed the Dominion, the greatest gamble in galactic history was about to begin. The last speakers sent their final message before their equipment died forever. Good luck, children of Earth. You carry the hopes of every free mind in the galaxy. Speak for those who can no longer speak. And remember that unity is stronger than conquest, but only if you can resist what destroyed us. The quantum network was ready. The Dominion fleet had arrived, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something ancient and hungry was waiting to see what Earth would do. General Kyung-soo stood in the largest meeting room on Luna, surrounded by holographic images of alien leaders from across the galaxy. The room buzzed with different languages, as Velkari generals argued with Morvan admirals, while Nexari commanders shared silent telepathic conversations. Through the windows, Earth hung blue and beautiful in the black sky. The Dominion fleet had been spotted at the edge of the solar system, moving slowly but steadily toward Earth like a dark storm cloud that promised destruction. Every sensor reading showed the same thing. 2,000 enemy ships armed with weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. Kyung-soo activated the translation system so everyone could understand each other. We have perhaps 6 hours before they arrive in attack range. Our conventional weapons have failed every time we tried to fight them. The only thing we have not tried is the quantum network. A Velkari admiral named Torval raised his hand, speaking in clicks and whistles that the computer translated. You ask us to link our minds with other species. We barely trust you humans. Why should we share our thoughts with beings we have fought for centuries? The question hung in the air like poison. Every species in the room had been enemies with at least half the others. The Morvans and Velkari had fought 3 wars in the past century. The Nexari refused to work with anyone who could not read minds. The smaller species feared being dominated by the larger. Once Dr. Hyejin stepped forward, carrying a portable quantum transmitter the size of a briefcase. This device can link minds while preserving individual identity. You will still be yourselves, but you will also understand everyone else. We tested it. With volunteers from each species, she activated the transmitter and suddenly the room changed. 5 volunteers from different species stood in a circle, their eyes glowing with quantum energy. They spoke in their own languages, but everyone understood perfectly. A Velkari warrior shared the memory of his destroyed home planet. A Nexari child showed the fear she felt when the attacks began. The demonstration lasted only 5 minutes, but it changed everything. The alien leaders saw their former enemies. As people for the first time, they felt the same hopes and fears, the same desire to protect their families and worlds. The barriers between species began to crumble. Captain Daeho explained the tactical advantages of the network with linked minds. our ships could coordinate perfectly. Every pilot would know what every other pilot was thinking. We could fight as one organism instead of separate fleets that barely trust each other. Commander. Nari showed the technical specifications, the quantum. Transmitters could be installed on every ship in the refugee fleet. Each transmitter would link to the main array on Luna, creating a network that covered the entire solar system. Any being who chose to join would become part of the collective defense. The alien leaders were scared, but they were also desperate. The Dominion had destroyed their worlds, killed their people, and left them with nowhere else to run. Earth was offering them something that had never existed before: true unity between species that had been enemies for millennia. Engineer Boram worked with teams of technicians to install quantum transmitters on ships throughout the fleet. The devices had to be calibrated for each species' brain patterns. Velkari thought in mathematical concepts. Morvans processed information in long, slow waves. Nexari minds worked in telepathic clusters. Lieutenant Minho coordinated the installation process. Each ship needed its transmitter connected to the main network through quantum field generators. The timing had to be perfect. If even one transmitter activated at the wrong moment, it could create feedback that would fry every connected brain in the fleet. Su Yan translated technical manuals into dozens of languages so alien engineers could understand how to maintain their transmitters. The quantum field was delicate and required constant adjustment. Any species that joined the network would need trained technicians to keep their connections stable. The main transmitter array on Luna was a marvel of human engineering. Banks of quantum crystals arranged in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The crystals hummed with energy that existed in dimensions beyond normal space, creating connections between minds that were light years apart. Dr. Heejin monitored the energy readings as more transmitters came online. The network was growing stronger with each new connection, but it was also becoming more complex. Managing millions of linked minds without creating chaos required processing power beyond anything ever attempted. Admiral Tae-jin received reports from scout ships at the edge of the solar system. The Dominion fleet had stopped moving. They seemed to be waiting for something scanning the inner planets, with sensors that could detect quantum activity. Maybe they knew what Earth was planning. As word spread through the refugee camps that a quantum network was being built, reactions were mixed. Some aliens were excited by the possibility of true communication with other species. Others were terrified of having their minds connected to strangers. Many were simply confused about what it would mean. The Nexari were the most enthusiastic about joining the network. They were already telepathic and understood the power of shared consciousness. Their leader, an ancient being named Kes Ara, volunteered to be the first non-human to link with the system. Velkari engineers worked alongside human technicians installing quantum field generators throughout their ships. The mathematical precision required was incredible. One miscalculation could create quantum storms that would tear the ships apart. From the inside, Morvan scholars studied the philosophical implications of the network. What would happen to individual identity when millions of minds were connected? Would they still be themselves or become part of something larger? Many Morvans were afraid of losing their ancient wisdom in the flood of other species' thoughts. The smaller species faced a different fear. They worried about being dominated by the larger civilizations, whose minds might be stronger or more numerous. The network protocols had safeguards to prevent this, but trust was hard to build in just a few hours. Engineer Boram made a crucial discovery while testing the network shields. The barriers that protected connected minds from outside influence worked, but they required constant energy. The longer the network stayed active, the more power it consumed. Eventually, the shields might fail. Time was running out. The Dominion fleet had begun moving again, accelerating toward Earth with weapons charging. In less than 2 hours, they would be in attack range. The quantum network had to be activated soon, or the chance would be lost forever. General Kyung-soo gave the final orders. All ships with quantum transmitters were to move into formation around Luna. The main array would activate at his command, linking every willing mind in the solar system into the first. Galactic communication network in 50,000 years. Captain Dae-ho stood on his bridge watching alien ships take their positions. Each vessel represented a different species, a different culture, a different way of thinking. Soon, they would all be connected, sharing thoughts and feelings across the void of space. The Dominion ships appeared on long-range sensors like dark stars blotting out the light. Their weapons were more powerful than anything in the galaxy, their shields stronger than planetary defenses, but they had never faced an enemy that could think as one. The quantum network was ready. Every transmitter was online, every connection tested. Every being who chose to join had said goodbye to the isolation that had defined Galactic civilization for millions of years. In moments, they would all become something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before and the Dominion had never fought, a unified voice that could speak for every free mind in the universe. The quantum network activated just as the Dominion fleet entered Earth's outer system. Admiral Tae-jin felt the connection establish itself like a warm wave washing over his consciousness. Suddenly, he wasn't just human anymore. He was Velkari, and Morvan and Nexari and dozens of other species all at once. The sensation was overwhelming at first, but then came the understanding. Every being in the network could feel the other's thoughts, emotions, and memories. Fear gave way to courage as millions of minds shared their strength. Despair transformed into hope as different species realized they were no longer alone. Dr. Hae-jin monitored the network's stability from the lunar array. The quantum field was holding perfectly, creating something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly unified consciousness that preserved individual identity while enabling perfect communication and understanding. On his bridge, Captain Dae-ho experienced something remarkable. Through the network, he could perceive the battlefield from thousands of different viewpoints simultaneously. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical consideration was shared instantly across the entire fleet. The Dominion attacks began with their usual overwhelming force. But something was different this time. The Allied fleet moved with perfect coordination, ships from different species working together as if they had trained for decades. The network allowed them to anticipate each other's actions, to fight as a single organism while maintaining their individual strengths. Commander Nari, linked to pilots from a dozen different species, coordinated strikes that would have been impossible without the network. Velkari precision, Morvan endurance, Nexari intuition, and human creativity combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. But the true shock came when the Dominion ships suddenly stopped firing. Through the network, the Allied forces could sense confusion and fear emanating from the enemy vessels. The attackers had never faced unified resistance before, and they didn't know how to respond. Then, impossibly, a transmission came from the Dominion flagship. After years of absolute silence, they were finally trying to communicate. The Dominion commander's voice broke through the static with centuries of pain and exhaustion. General Kyung-soo listened in amazement as their greatest enemy began to tell a story that changed everything. They were not the monsters everyone believed them to be. They were victims of something far worse. The tale that emerged was more tragic than anyone had imagined. 10,000 years ago, the Dominion had been explorers and scientists who traveled the galaxy sharing knowledge and bringing peace to warring worlds. They had built the first quantum communication network connecting hundreds of species in perfect harmony. For 5,000 years, they had been the galaxy's greatest teachers. Their quantum network had ended wars, prevented conflicts, and allowed different species to understand each other in ways never before possible. The Dominion had created a golden age of cooperation and learning. But then they had encountered something from the dark spaces between galaxies. Beings that existed, in the void between stars, creatures that fed on consciousness itself. The Dominion called them the Void. Touched parasites that could enter minds through quantum connections. Lieutenant Min Ho translated the technical data flooding through the communication channels. The Void touched were not physical beings, but entities made of pure thought and hunger. They could only exist by consuming the consciousness of living beings, draining their memories, emotions, and identity. The Dominion's quantum network had made them incredibly vulnerable to these parasites. The same connections that brought understanding and peace also created pathways for the Void, touched to spread from mind to mind like a disease that infected thoughts instead of bodies, Dr. Hyejin realized the horrible truth. The Dominion's network had been perfect too perfect. It had no defenses, no barriers to protect individual minds from outside influence. When the Void touched found it, they had consumed entire worlds through the quantum connections. The invasion had been swift and merciless. Billions of connected minds fell to the parasites in a matter of days. The Void touched used the Dominion's own network against them, turning their greatest achievement into a weapon that destroyed their civilization from within. Those who survived the initial assault had been enslaved by the parasites. Their bodies remained alive, but their minds were controlled by the Void touched, who used them as tools to spread further across the galaxy. The proud scientists and explorers became destroyers against their will. Engineer Boram studied the data with growing horror. The Void touched had spent thousands of years using the enslaved Dominion to hunt down and destroy any species that might develop quantum communication technology. They were preventing anyone else from creating networks the parasites could infect. Every attack, every destroyed world, every silent assault had been the Void, touched trying to protect themselves. They used the Dominion as their army to eliminate any civilization that came close to discovering the secrets of quantum networking. The Dominion commander continued his story through tears that had been building for millennia. We tried to resist, but they were inside our minds, controlling our thoughts, making us destroy the very things we had once protected. We became the monsters we had once fought against. Commander Nari felt the weight of this revelation through the quantum network. Every linked mind experienced the same horror and understanding. The enemy they had been fighting was not evil, but trapped. The real evil was something that fed on the connections between conscious beings. Through the communication link, the Dominion revealed more of their terrible secret. Every species they had destroyed had been developing quantum networks. The Velkari had been 6 months away from their first successful mind link. The Morvans had been testing quantum crystals similar to Earth's design. The attacks had not been random conquest. They had been desperate attempts to prevent the Void, touched from gaining new feeding grounds. Every civilization the Dominion destroyed was one less network the parasites could infect and consume. Captain Day-Ho felt the quantum network shudder as something vast and hungry stirred at the edge of the solar system. The barriers Dr. He-Jin had built were holding, but they were being tested by an intelligence older than most stars. The Void touched had been sleeping in the empty spaces between galaxies waiting for another quantum network to be built. Now that Earth's system was active and growing stronger by the moment, the ancient parasites were waking up. Admiral Tae-Jin sensed the moment when the true enemy revealed itself. Dark spots appeared in space where the quantum network's signals simply disappeared, consumed by something that existed in the dimensions between normal reality. The Void touched were feeding through the Dominion communication. Link came a warning that made every connected mind freeze with terror. The parasites were not just hungry, they were intelligent. They learned from every network they consumed, and Earth's quantum system was more advanced than anything they had encountered. Before. The Void Touched began to probe the network's defenses, testing the barriers that protected linked minds. They moved like liquid shadows through quantum space, searching for weaknesses they could exploit to gain entry to the millions of consciousness. Connected to Earth's system, Dr. Hyojin worked frantically to strengthen the network's shields. The quantum barriers were holding, but they were being attacked by entities that understood consciousness better than any living being they had fed on. Minds for millions of years. Su Yan received desperate messages from the Dominion fleet. The enslaved crews were fighting against their mental chains, trying to break free from the parasites that had controlled them for thousands of years. The quantum network's barriers were disrupting the Void-touched control systems. Some Dominion warriors managed to break free completely. Their minds clearing for the first time in millennia, they remembered who they had been before the parasites took control. They had been teachers, artists, scientists, people who had once believed in peace and cooperation. The freed Dominion soldiers began to help the Allied fleet, sending technical data about Void, touched weaknesses and attack patterns. They knew more about the parasites than any living beings, because they had been enslaved by them for so long. Engineer Boram discovered something crucial in the Dominion data. The Void-touched were powerful, but they had one major weakness. They could only exist by consuming consciousness. If they were cut off from minds to feed on, they would starve and die. The quantum network that had attracted the parasites could also be used to fight them. By creating quantum static that disrupted their feeding, the Allied forces could weaken the Void. Touched enough to drive them back to the empty spaces between galaxies, Lieutenant Minho coordinated with newly freed Dominion technicians to modify the network's output. Instead of just linking minds, the system could now generate quantum interference that acted like poison to consciousness parasites. The battle was about to enter its final phase. The Void-touched were fully awake now and attacking the network with everything they had. The Allied fleet faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations across multiple galaxies, but they also had something the parasites had never encountered before: a quantum network with barriers strong enough to resist infection and weapons designed specifically to fight. Entities made of pure thought. The galaxy's first successful defense against the creatures that had terrorized the universe for millions of years. Through the quantum link, every mind in the fleet felt the same determination. They would not just survive this attack. They would end the threat of the Void-touched forever and free every enslaved being in the galaxy. The real war was finally beginning. Admiral Tae Jin felt the moment when everything changed forever. Through the quantum network, millions of minds suddenly understood the true nature of their enemy. The Dominion were not conquerors, but prisoners, trapped by their own desperate attempt to contain an even greater threat. The revelation rippled through the linked consciousness like waves of understanding. Every human Velkari, Morven and Nexari mind, connected to the network, experienced the same moment of clarity. The enemy they had feared was actually trying to save the galaxy by sacrificing themselves. Captain Dae-ho reached out through the quantum connection, extending the network toward the Dominion ships. The enemy commander hesitated, knowing that accepting the link would mean abandoning thousands of years of isolation. Then slowly, carefully, the Dominion fleet opened their minds to the network. The moment their consciousness touched the Allied network, something broke inside the enslaved warriors. For the first time in millennia, the Dominion felt the warmth of truly free communication without the poisonous whispers of the Void-touched, controlling their thoughts. One by one, Dominion soldiers began to remember who they had been before the parasites claimed them. Scientists who had mapped distant galaxies, artists who had created beauty that lasted for centuries, teachers who had shown young minds how to reach for the stars. Commander Nari felt their awakening through the network and wept. The fierce warriors who had terrorized the galaxy were crying like children as they remembered their true selves. The quantum link was breaking the chains that had bound them for thousands of years. Dr. Hyejin monitored the network's power levels from her station on Luna. The quantum field was using incredible amounts of energy as more minds joined the connection, but something else was happening. The barriers protecting linked consciousness were growing stronger, not weaker. Every new mind that joined the network added to its defensive power. The diversity of thought from dozens of different species created something the void touched could not understand or control. The parasites had evolved to feed on simple single species. Networks, engineer Bo Ram worked frantically to weaponize the network's defensive systems. The quantum barriers could be modified to project interference that would burn the void touched wherever they tried to feed. The network that had been built for communication was becoming a weapon. The real battle began as the ancient parasites emerged from the dark spaces between dimensions. They appeared as holes in space itself, places where light and matter simply ceased to exist. The void. Touched had grown powerful, feeding on consciousness for millions of years. Lieutenant Min Ho felt the attack as the parasites tried to penetrate the network's defenses. They struck not with weapons or energy beams, but with pure hunger, trying to drain the life from every connected mind. The barriers held, but the assault was overwhelming. Through the quantum link, the Allied and Dominion forces fought together against an enemy that existed in the spaces between thoughts. Their weapons were not missiles or lasers, but will and determination, transmitted through quantum connections. Su Yan translated battle coordination that flowed through the network faster than light itself. Every mind knew what every other mind was planning. Human creativity combined with Dominion experience and alien wisdom to create strategies the void touched had never faced. The parasites fought back with every tool they possessed. They tried to corrupt the network, to turn the linked minds against each other, to spread the same despair that had destroyed countless civilizations. But the diversity of the Alliance was their salvation. Velkari logic resisted corruption through mathematical precision. Morvan determination endured attacks through ancient wisdom. Nexari intuition sensed deception before it could take hold. Human creativity found solutions the parasites could not predict. General Kyung-soo coordinated the final assault from his command center on Earth. The network had become a weapon of pure consciousness focused against entities that fed on thought itself. The quantum interference burned through the void, touched like fire through paper. Engineer Boram made the crucial modification that sealed their victory. She routed the quantum network through the gravitational fields of neutron stars, creating feedback loops that existed in multiple dimensions. The interference became too complex for the parasites to absorb. The void, touched, tried to retreat to the dark spaces where they had hidden for millions of years. But the quantum network followed them there, projecting barriers and interference into dimensions beyond normal space. For the first time in their existence, the parasites faced an enemy. They could not consume the ancient entities that had terrorized the galaxy for eons, fled back to the empty spaces between distant galaxies. Their hunger finally met by something they could not digest. The quantum network had become indigestible to creatures that fed on consciousness. As the battle ended, the galaxy found itself transformed. The network that had been built for war became the foundation of a new kind of civilization. Species that had never trusted each other now shared their thoughts and feelings. Freely, Admiral Tae-jin stood on Earth's surface, feeling the consciousness of trillions of beings flowing through the quantum connection. The Dominion fleet had joined the network permanently. Their long isolation finally ended. They shared their vast knowledge and technology with the species. They had once been forced to attack. Captain Dae-ho commanded one of the first mixed cruise ships with humans, Dominion soldiers and alien refugees working together. The quantum network made communication perfect, but more than that, it made understanding inevitable. When you could feel someone else's emotions, hatred became impossible. Commander Nari helped establish the first Galactic Council where representatives from every species could share their thoughts directly through quantum links. Decisions that had once taken years of negotiation now happened in minutes when everyone could understand everyone else perfectly. The freed Dominion warriors became teachers again, sharing the knowledge they had gained during their thousands of years of wandering the galaxy. They helped establish new colonies on worlds that had been destroyed, showing other species how to rebuild and grow. Terrorized Jin expanded the quantum network to reach distant galaxies where other civilizations might be struggling against their own versions of the void. Touched. The barriers and weapons Earth had developed could protect any species that chose to join the galactic community. Lieutenant Min Ho worked with communication teams to contact isolated worlds that had hidden themselves from the galaxy. The network allowed them to prove their peaceful intentions by sharing their actual thoughts and emotions, rather than just words. Engineer Boram designed new quantum transmitters that could be built by any civilization. The technology was shared freely with everyone because the network was strongest when it included the most diverse range of minds and perspectives. The universe remained vast and full of mysteries, but no species faced those mysteries alone. The quantum network had created something that had never existed before. A truly unified galactic civilization that preserved individual identity while enabling perfect understanding. General Kyung-soo often stood under Earth's stars thinking about how much had changed. The galaxy that had been torn apart by fear and suspicion was now united by the simple act of communication. The most powerful weapon ever created was the willingness to speak and listen. In the end, it was not advanced technology or superior weapons that saved the galaxy. It was humanity's stubborn refusal to give up on the idea that different species could understand each other. The quantum network proved that communication was stronger than conquest. The void touched had been defeated not by violence but by connection, not by isolation, but by unity. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the universe, that when different minds speak to each other with honesty and openness, even the darkest threats cannot survive. They had terrorized the galaxy until we spoke. Then they discovered that some things are more powerful than fear. Understanding is stronger than hatred. Connection is more durable than conquest. And in the end, the voice of united consciousness can overcome any darkness that tries to silence it.